Great. Hi. Well, welcome. Welcome to Achieve More from Your Training Investment, the keys to continued knowledge, growth, and retention, the webinar here. I'm Beth Garcia. I'm the CEO of MOHR Retail, and I'm real excited to be here. MOHR Retail is really a company that we feel like we are the most experienced training company on this planet. We've been in retail a long time. All of us are deeply seated in the retail industry and very proud about that. We train the interpersonal skills that drive results, and results are so important in the retail industry. And that means leadership, sales, service, negotiation. And I am so thrilled to be talking about this topic today with my old friend and colleague and business partner from Axonify, JD Dillon, the chief architect and the author. JD, welcome.
Hi, shameless plug for the book, but thanks for inviting me to be here. Excited to chat.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, it's really great. And we are longtime friends because we have been at MOHR Retail partner with Axonify for almost 13 years. And at the time, it wasn't even called Axonify. It was called 17 Muscles. So we thought it would be a good opportunity for you to talk a little bit about Axonify while we play for pride, not prize, and do a trivia game. And we want everyone to be involved in this. So please, the chat is open. Please respond to our first question that we have here. I mentioned that when we joined Axonify, it was called 17 Muscles. What do you think 17 Muscles means? Why did they name the company 17 Muscles? Let's look in chat. Go ahead and type in. Any guesses on what 17 muscles means?
If people are slow to answer, it might be a reinforcement of the fact that we changed the name of the company, and it's a good decision.
That's a good one on that too. I'm going to give another second to see. Do we have anyone typing in? And Jacqueline is here today to help us out, and she's reading some of the polls. Let's just see. Chat seems to be disabled. Well, that's a bad thing. Let's see if we can. Yes. Well, that's not good.
Just scream it out loud at your desk.
Scream it out loud at your desk and we'll hear that. That's not what we, I was just going to say. Let's see if we can get this. And for some reason we can't. Well, that's not fun because we really wanted to make this more interactive. So if anyone guessed, how many muscles are in your face it takes to smile? So that's what 17 Muscles was, and that was. So JD, why do you think that was important to name the company and talking about smile? Why was that important?
I can't give you a great answer there. You can tell the originators of the company are being clever, right? Being creative with regards to the feel that you get from being confident in your ability to do your job, right? Wanting the concept of training and developing yourself as part of your day-to-day work to be an enjoyable experience. That's my best guess. I was not here at the time, but I'm going to lean into the fact that it was a good decision to change the name of the company.
It's great. I think it's great. And Axonify is a worldwide company now, and certainly we know the brand. All right. So we have data from the last 10 years because when it was called 17 Muscles, not all the data when it changed to Axonify over 10 years ago. So how many reinforcement questions have MOHR Retail participants answered in the last 10 years? Well, I'm sorry that we can't be able to get that, and maybe the Q&A, we can put something in there. I apologize that the chat's not working, but we had 1,230,549 questions have been answered by retail participants who've gone through our training and then gone through the reinforcement on that. So JD, talk a little bit about the reinforcement and why that's so important with Axonify and why we partner with you to make sure that the training and the touch points afterwards come to life.
Sure. So the digital learning experience of Axonify that's kind of wrapped in our enablement technology is unique in the fact that we don't just deliver training one and done and say, you've consumed content, therefore you know and will do on the job. We know that people forget. And people are not necessarily confident in their ability to apply if they took the training 6 months ago and they haven't faced that particular challenge since then. So reinforcement's a critical part of our story. It's where we come from. It's really the base of the Axonify narrative. And we make sure that in just a couple of minutes a day, employees in a retail store have the opportunity to challenge their knowledge, apply what they know in a scenario-based type of a situation, so that you can be confident that people didn't just take the training, they remember the information they need to make the right decision, deliver the right experience. And last year was an interesting year from a volume of questions perspective, because that's the number in the past 10 years with MOHR Retail training participants across Axonify in 2022 alone. People answered 1 billion reinforcement questions last year.
Wow.
So 1 billion is a large number, especially when you consider most of the engagement is voluntary. People just taking a couple of minutes out of their day to reinforce their knowledge.
Absolutely. Well, that's fantastic. I'm glad that we had a little slice of our million in there that we can with using Axonify. All right. What's been the MOHR Retail participant average percentage of knowledge growth? And that is something, talk to me a little bit about knowledge growth, because it's something that is the reason that we partner with Axonify in terms of growing knowledge after the training. So, JD?
Sure. Connects to what I said before in terms of, when people complete training, whether it's on the job training, e-learning, what classroom-based training, they did the thing, right? They completed the event. They checked the box. You don't necessarily know what they know, right? Do they have the knowledge they need to be successful on the job? And then even more importantly, when we talk about reinforcement, are they retaining that knowledge? Because you may give people an assessment after they complete the training, maybe an onboarding. So you kind of know what they knew then, but now we're a year later. What do they know now? And there's a tremendous amount of capability that comes from understanding the capability of your workforce and knowing what people know now, so that you can more effectively coach people. You can more effectively put people in the right positions based on their strengths. So understanding kind of how knowledge changes over time is a critical part of upskilling your workforce.
Absolutely. And that's, the one thing that we both share, that passion, is that training can't be a one and done, right? And the fact is that once you apply it to the job, if you actually can learn more, that would be great. Well, we're really pleased that over 12% knowledge growth is the average. We get some that have more. And that means after completing our training, they're still learning and being able to apply that. And I think that's where we're talking about today, is really, how do we drive ROI, right? How do we get that ROI from the training investment? Well, one of the things is to have them keep learning once they apply those skills to the job, which is very important. So how many retail participants have we had in all of our training programs in leadership, sales, service, and negotiation skills downloaded in the past year? Just taking a guess on that too. I got John raising his hand here. John, that's a ton of questions, is right. It's got 5,000 in there. Thank you, John, for playing along. Who else do we have in the Q&A? And I apologize that the chat is disabled. It wasn't earlier, of course. All right, so let's see. And the grand total is 11,800 participants loaded to the platform. And that is fantastic. And again, that's 10 years. We had another 3 years that we don't have the data on it, that we'd like to probably add another few thousands on that too. And we have, great. John, you got 5,000. I think that was for the last for that, but we have tripled that number. All right, and the last question: what is the most utilized game participants choose? And we're going to talk a little bit about gamification. Why is gamification important to learning? I mean, we can't have people playing Candy Crush all day, can we, JD?
No, you shouldn't. But the interesting thing around, because when we ask the question around most utilized game, Axonify leverages a variety of different game mechanics and strategies to engage, recognize, reward people, but also when you talk about gameplay, it not only makes the experience of learning fun, it also sets you up for a state of flow. So you're paying attention to the experience of what you're doing in potentially a busy environment with a lot of potential distractions. So if you've ever tried to interrupt someone when they're playing a game, it's kind of hard to drag their attention away from that activity. So we give people the option to play a game as part of their learning experience so they can focus on what they're doing, have a little fun, maybe challenge a friend along the way. And what's interesting is the most utilized game in the MOHR Retail experience just recently became the most utilized game of Axonify. So for a long time, it's always kind of neck and neck when it comes to the different games and their popularity around the world. But Bubble Shooter is now the most popular game in Axonify.
Well, Bubble Shooter has a universal appeal of Axonify. That is the #1 game that people choose. And again, just to get their mind going, it's part of the brain science, but also, for any of those athletes out there that stretch before running, it's just kind of that same concept. Let's stretch our brain. Let's get it ready for learning. And for those of you who are not used to Axonify or familiar with the platform, they're not playing games. It's really just a quick hit, as JD said, just to get them focused on, get that brain energized so that they're ready for learning on that. So, well, that was fun. What else? Is there anything else you want to add about Axonify when we start talking about our topic today and the 7 tips and ways that we can achieve long-term results on our training investment?
So many different things I could jump into, but I think the key to the story is that we're finding ways to create kind of seamless enablement experiences within a busy, customer-focused retail environment, right? So we recognize people don't have either the autonomy or the time to just step away to focus on additional training or to go look for a course that they want to complete that is even 20 minutes long is too long, something that's 45 minutes or a couple of hours. So the idea behind Axonify and the experience we provide from an enablement perspective is really about finding those couple of minutes a day that people have, potentially, as you mentioned, when they first clock in for their shift. Foot Locker, one of our great partners, has a great saying or kind of mantra around how they leverage Axonify, and that's people clock in, lace up, and hit the floor. Lace up is what they've branded Axonify. So they've built it into their culture, and it becomes just something that people do every day. And the great thing is that when you say something like, 3 to 5 minutes of training a day doesn't sound like a lot compared to other training activities, but it adds up over time. And it also, as you mentioned with learning science, aligns with how people actually learn, because we can only take in and retain so much information. So we leverage that reality of learning science to create an experience that fits into even the most busy retail associate day.
Absolutely. And that is what's key, is to making it easy for them to get mobile engaged, to make it in real time. And again, that they can get these quick bites that they're able to apply for the job right away, which is fantastic. All right, so let's launch. And I think that's gives us a great platform to really talk about the tips and the successful ways that we have. We've kind of put this together at MOHR Retail. We find that when we work with organizations, these are kind of the top 7 successful ways to achieve that ROI for your training investment. And all of them are important. And, we're really starting out really with #1 is keeping senior leaders involved. 2 is providing on-the-job tools and reinforcement, which we'll talk a little bit more, because that's why we use Axonify at MOHR Retail. It's very important that the job and the touch points happen after training. There's no one and done. Holding them accountable. And what JD talked about, bringing that part of the culture and really making learning, a learning environment versus a proving environment, but holding people accountable. Measuring for continuous improvement, right? What gets measured gets done. Coaching and leadership training. We kind of have that twice, because keeping senior leaders involved is so important, but also investing in the leaders, because they have such high influence on all of the team members. And that's really they are the disciples for the culture in the organization. Let them teach to learn. We're going to talk a little bit about train the trainers and why that's important. And then the last one is celebrating success. So these are the 7 tips that we're going to spend the next 30 or so minutes going on and really get JD's insights. And I'll share some of my key learnings from all of our 40 years of learning at MOHR Retail. And so just thinking about ROI, why is that important really for investment? Because I think ROI is such a huge catchphrase in retail. Everybody wants a return investment. When we talk about the talent investment, why is that important, and how can we really make that happen, that there is a return on investment for training? JD, what are your insights?
So I think my background, I refer to myself as having a frontline focused career. So I've spent my entire professional life focused on supporting and enabling frontline employees. So I managed movie theaters, I managed theme parks. I spent 10 years at the Walt Disney Company before I go into learning and development, managed learning and development in theme parks, contact centers, and now I'm on the technology side of the story. And something that I see consistently is that we underestimate the value of investing in frontline workers because we assume that they're going to leave. Right? There is notoriously high turnover, especially for the last couple of years in spaces like retail. And we often second guess the amount that we invest in people because, what is your turnover this year? 140%, 160%, 700%, right? So we do the bare minimum to get people up and running without recognizing that strategically investing in people's development has a clear business return in areas that you're looking to achieve. So whether it's sales numbers, whether it's customer satisfaction, whether it's labor productivity, there's a variety of ways that we can improve business outcomes through improving the capability of our people. And then one of the things that, as you look at how we're struggling to attract and retain great workers within a retail environment, one of the things people consistently come back to is they want to see opportunity within a job. It's not enough to just have a job and just do one thing for an extended period of time. People aren't going to be retained through that type of an experience. People are looking at the chance to do different things, the chance to potentially pursue a career. And I think the other big consideration for retailers right now is bench strength. When we talk about the importance of leadership, is how do we build the next set of store managers and assistant managers? And that's all going to come from meaningful investment in how we engage our frontline workforce and how we help them continue to develop themselves after they walk through the door and get started on the job. But we need to do it, again, from a strategic perspective, so we know we're getting value out of that investment. It's not learning for the sake of learning or training for the sake of training. It is actually helping us develop our business, get the results we need to achieve, but through the capability and execution of our frontline teams.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's all about retention, about keeping the people, keeping them engaged, keeping them to stay longer so that there is succession, that we are promoting those leaders. You talked about how important that is. And really, if we can provide better internal service, I'm a big proponent that that's going to bring much better external service to all of your customers too. Then the more customers like to see the same people there and like to know that they're knowledgeable on that too. So great insights on that. So these are our 7. Let's get started, and really starting off with, I'd like to really kind of start off with a poll, and we're going to launch a poll, and I'm hoping that's one way we can engage all of you today, since our chat is not, but it should be showing up on the screen now. And I just want to see if everybody is seeing that. There are 2 questions. What percentage of participants will actually use what was learned back on the job? And the next is, what participants are asked by their manager and or have some kind of reminder? What's the percentage that you think? Okay, they're coming in now. So we've got about 18%. About 63% of our folks. A few more coming in. All right, I'm going to end, and I'm going to share the results now. All right, so what percentage of participants will actually use what's learned back on the job? Coming in at less than 20%, and that's 50% of the group is saying that. And I'll reveal the big reveal in a few minutes to see, but I think you're pretty much on track. And then the other is when participants are asked by their manager, right? Giving them permission to actually use those skills on the job. What's that percentage on that too? And it goes up to 85% was the number one answer, 10%. Actually, we got 85 and 10%. So it's interesting. I know we can't put it in chat, but those that put the 38% that said 10% having their manager will actually raise it. But let's take a look at what the answers are that we've learned in our years of experience. Is that, yeah, it's just 16 to 24% of associates who've gone to training will actually do it on the job, will actually take the initiative to use the skills on the job. What's really important is that boss's role. When the participants are reinforced with their boss, when they're asking about the training, when they're showing some engagement and interest in them and what they've learned, then it goes to over 85%. So absolutely in some of those. And for those that put 10%, yeah, I'd love to know a little bit more about that. I don't know if it's a culture thing with the bosses as to why that might be so low, but we'll try and take a look. Let me just take a look here. Internal MOHR data. Yeah, the internal MOHR data, John, thank you for asking that too. This is based on our experience and data from our clients, but also on some from the training associations and so forth that we have found on that too, that becomes a norm on that. But we are finding that really, if you don't do anything, it's use it or lose it on the OR. So just going back into, let's talk a little bit about why those senior leaders. We've just shown how important that is, but We do a lot. Whenever we implement training, we really want the leaders to be involved, and we want them to be engaged in the training, and not just an overview, one-page summary. We want them to understand what their role is on that, for modeling and support, because that will really help with the ROI. JD, what is your thoughts on that senior leader's role?
I tend not to talk to a lot of senior managers and executives about learning, because there's kind of a frank reality out there, and it's that they don't care. They very much care about having a capable workforce that executes what they need to be done on the job. But that kind of concept of learning and training historically maybe doesn't have the greatest return on investment in their mind, or they're locked in a certain perspective on what learning is. Because the interesting thing is, still a vast majority of people out there think learning looks like school. Right? Thinks learning is disruptive, that it's pulling people away and making it harder to do the job. And frankly, I was one of those people when I was an operations manager. When the learning and development team pulled my staff out of the operation, it made my life harder. It didn't make my ability to do the job better. So I think that's a critical part of the story, is if you're trying to gain buy-in and get alignment with a group of senior managers who maybe aren't there doing the job every day, it's important to put this conversation in the language that they'll appreciate, right? That it's the outcome they're looking for. So more times than not, I'm not talking about learning on my presentation. I'm talking about behavior change. I'm talking about helping people make good decisions. And I'm always talking about doing it in the most non-disruptive way possible, because I have never had a problem when I walk into a conversation with a retailer and say, what if I could help your frontline team execute the way you want them to do their job every day, and do it in a way that doesn't disrupt your operation?
Absolutely.
That's a much better story than saying, let's do a different learning strategy.
Absolutely. But their role is key, and really teaching them the skills to really reinforce that too. But getting those people engaged and believing that their boss supports this, right? That their boss supports the learning. All right, number 2, on the job tools. And this is exactly what we use, Axonify, having that reinforcement after the training. And, this comes up because one of the images, and we got that question that someone asking about the confidence monitors and so forth, but just really, looking at the app and being able to reinforce, at MOHR Retail, we use level 1, 2, and 3 questions. We get them started even before they go on the course, all through the course. And then, for months after, that they're able to continually play games, stretch their brain, but reinforce these questions to get harder and harder. And that's how that knowledge growth happens. JD, you're the expert on providing job tools. And then if you could talk about that and the confidence, because I know that was a question that came up in chat or QA.
So the idea is really kind of taking what the experience of everyday life is and applying it to the workplace. Because when you think about it, you can solve amazingly complex problems at home because you always have access to information. You have access to tools that help you get to the answer that you need faster and faster, especially when we talk about the conversation around AI and generative AI tools right now and how it's evolving search and information in general. Unfortunately, when you go to work, you're often left on your own and you ask the person next to you, or you have to rely on your manager for the information. And the unfortunate reality is that your peer may not know what's going on either, and your manager may also not necessarily be the expert in a particular topic. So the idea behind Axonify is that, and increasingly so, you have help in your pocket, right? You have the assistance that you need to be able to do your job and improve your ability to execute every shift right there with you. And that includes, on the handheld device that you may be using, like a Zebra handheld device. It may be a tablet that is sitting behind your specialty department in the grocery store. It may be your personal smartphone, which is an increasingly common way that people access support from Axonify. And then we make sure that if your customer asks a question and you've been there for 3 days, the customer doesn't care. Right? They want the answer. They need the experience, or otherwise they're not going to come back. So we make sure we put that information in your pocket to say, you have quick access to whatever that answer might be to that customer question. We've already talked about reinforcement. You log in to Axonify a couple minutes a day. We look at your profile and say, how can we help you get a little bit better today? So that's really the experience behind Axonify Enablement, is making sure that you have that guidance, you have that coach with you as part of the job, and then we augment the rest of the experience so that your manager, we talk about the confidence piece, your manager has better data about your performance, where you're struggling, where you're succeeding, so they can have a more informed conversation with you. And that's where confidence really comes in, because it's not just about what you know, It's about your confidence in your ability to apply that knowledge. So when we ask people questions in Axonify, we challenge your knowledge about a particular customer service scenario. We don't just ask you what the answer is. We ask you, how confident are you in that answer? So it's a self-reported layer of confidence, but it gives that additional dimension of data to your manager so they can look at your profile and say, hey, I can see that you really know this, but you seem to be expressing that you're not quite confident in that. Or flip that, you don't know this information, but you're always saying that you're highly confident in your responses. Someone who has high confidence and low knowledge is someone who's potentially going to make a bad decision at some point, right? So we help managers get ahead of that conversation by leveraging data and insights in a different way to have a more informed coaching conversation with their frontline workforce, whether it's in a store, distribution center, what have you.
Absolutely. That accountability is really so important. And we're going to talk about that next. But the having the leaders involved as we keep, that's just a thread we're going to keep pulling through, and that they have the leaders on and they're able to look at that data and it's, be able to make better choices with them and the behaviors. They're starting to see some things happen. And then they start realizing, are they overconfident? Are they underconfident? What can I do to really help them? Because they'll learn better. Great.
I do have a question for you real quick.
Yeah.
So Kate Parker asks the question, can people search Axonify as they would in knowledge base?
Yes. So a great example would be the work we do with Lowe's. Lowe's, the concept there is that they moved learning and support into the aisle, right? Because instead of maybe taking someone back of house onto a desktop computer in a back room or an HR office in grocery stores, there's often that like second floor that you don't know is there, but that's where maybe the HR office and the training computers are, and employees never get there. Right. So the idea is that we have to move support into the flow of how people do their jobs, and if possible, onto the devices people use to do their jobs. So if you go into a Lowe's store and you have a question about a particular product or a particular process, the employee may pull a device that they're using to do the job, search Axonify, and find that piece of information so they can share that information with you directly, maybe show you that information so it becomes a more informed experience. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is make I don't know less and less common as a response, because people have the help and they don't have to go find the information and leave the customer alone. They can work with them right there to get that answer.
Fantastic. Great. And Kate, thanks. I'm glad that you got that. And Jacqueline, thank you so much for keeping us on track with the questions that are coming in. We appreciate your support. Jacqueline's our marketing coordinator at MOHR Retail, and she's been our helpful woman behind the curtains, in front of the curtains today. All right, so we talked about accountability and how important that is, holding people accountable. Just because if I always feel like who would go bowling if you didn't keep score, right? You're just kind of knocking down pins. But when you have something that kind of creates that more of that fun and excitement, and you've got the goals that are in mind, holding people accountable to what the behaviors that you want in the organization are really important. And really those interpersonal skills and behaviors that, you're looking at technology on the phone doing that, but how do you apply it in real life? So what's your take on accountability and why that's important? Some best practices you've seen at Axonify, JD?
That's why frontline managers have to be an essential part of the training strategy in retail, right? Because as a learning and development team, I'm not there doing the job with people every day. Even if I provide great support resources, great job aids, great product information, great practice exercises, whatever I may be providing as a learning and development professional, I'm not there seeing the application of that knowledge and skill on the job every day. So we have to enable managers to have, as I was talking about, those more informed conversations. One important part of the Axonify story is that we have an entire space in our application for managers where we surface insights, not just who needs help and who needs coaching, who's doing great, right? Who are the experts? Who are the people that you might want to look at as someone who maybe becomes the next key holder, someone who you want to have a conversation about becoming an assistant manager and applying for an open role. And then we also offer tools like behavior observations, where people, as managers are observing people doing the job, instead of that being a one and done experience that doesn't inform the broader experience for the associate, the manager can record what they see on the job into Axonify, and then we use that data to further personalize the experience. So if your manager consistently sees you struggling in a particular area, and they obviously come up to you and have a coaching conversation with you, we can also adapt your training so that when you log into Axonify the next day, we might say, hey, let's go over this topic again because we saw that you might be struggling with this. So let's do a quick refresher on this area. So it really coordinates the experience of learning and support, but it really starts with enabling the manager to have that more targeted conversation and less assumption around, well, you're not doing it, you must need more training. That might not be the situation, and the data that we provide helps inform that discussion.
Well, I really could not agree with you more. We got to lean in, right? That's where the coaching comes in, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. But that is exactly it. We got to lean in and find out what's the root cause of the issue on that too. But accountability, I love the example. I was just talking to a client on Friday about that. Is that when they were in the grocery business, and they said, we have cashiers that want to know what's that future look like, what else I can do. So having that accountability, but also having that career pathing and having training available so that they can get to the next level even before they're there, because that's where the behavior change can start and they get a little practice in a safer environment. I think that's great. And then we have measure for continuous improvement. And, really what gets measured gets done. And, there's KPIs, there's so many KPIs in retail, particularly that we measure all the time. We take our score every day in retail, against LY, UPTs, what is it that we're measuring? What is it, because this really ties into the whole gamification and just the scoring and the competitive edge of Axonify that I think really attracts a lot of retailers. Tell me more about that and how you think the measurement for continuous improvement is really impactful at Axonify.
Yeah, I think a key part of the story around continuous improvement is that I think, unfortunately, a lot of organizations are obsessed with top performers. Right. We lean hard into those people who are constantly doing the job, excelling day to day. And we try to create more top performers. And we forget that you can't replicate that. Right. In a strange example, in one of my contact centers, I had a gentleman who had great customer service scores because he played the kazoo on the phone with customers. I don't know why. It worked. I wasn't going to teach everyone else to play the kazoo. So the trick here is that you're not trying to replicate those unique top performers. You need to really understand how people are improving. So I'm not obsessed with top performers. I'm obsessed with an iterative improvement. And that's the key with Axonify, is that you walk through the door, we start to assess where you are as a retail associate, because maybe you've worked in retail for 20 years. You're going to be at a different level than someone who maybe this is your first job. And the trick is that we're going to change the experience and help you progress at the pace both you're capable of and the pace the business needs you to move, right? And then reinforce the right things, personalize training, get the manager involved at the right times. So it's really about fostering that continuous improvement through personalized data. So we're helping everyone raise the bar and not just creating this gap between top performers who are great at their job and everyone else that we can't quite figure out how to help, because everyone's in a very different place.
Absolutely. And it's really about continuous improvement. No matter where you are, that you're growing and learning, and that more about learning environment versus the proving environment sometimes when we measure and we hold them accountable for certain metrics that aren't realistic, but being able to see them get better and better. I think that's really important. I'm just going to ask, because I'm afraid you have to put it on not chat, but Q&A. What are the things that you're measuring in your environment? Let's just kind of get everybody to put in, what are some of the type of improvements you're looking for that you're measuring? What are those KPIs in your organization? See if everybody can put that in Q&A. We're going to make Q&A very flexible today and make that the chat. Is there anything? All right. Time to productivity, Melody Smith. Hi, Melody, how are you today? Time to effective performance. Right, absolutely, John. Is that really more about how long for the onboarding and things? If you can just put in chat on Q&A, what it is that you're, the timing you are measuring for effective performance, John?
Yeah, and onboarding is a critical part of the story, because in so many cases, the onboarding experience of a retail associate is often sit in the back room for 2 days of click next to continue e-learning. And then that person who's worked here for a while is going to show you how it's really done. And it's just this kind of disconnected, inconsistent experience that I think overloads the employee up front we have to consider everything else that's going on with that associate, especially again, if they're limited in experience, first job, maybe this is a complicated environment that they're stepping into. They're curious about their schedule, when they get paid. Is their manager nice, right? There's so many things going on in that onboarding experience that I think it's easy to overwhelm and fire hose a person with information. So I always say the trick to accelerating time to performance or time to contribution, how you measure that, is making sure that we focus on the most critical information up front, but we're not getting rid of all the stuff that maybe we're not going to cover in those first 2 days anymore, so as to not overload the associate. We're stretching the experience. So turning onboarding from an experience that's just a couple of days to it's just the beginning of continuous development and continuous improvement, right? It's a very focused beginning, but then we're going to introduce new information as you go and keep elevating your performance without completely overloading you so much in the first day that I've seen various retail associates just get up and walk out because this isn't what they necessarily signed up for. This isn't fun, right? This isn't setting me up for success. So we have to take care of that if we want to get people contributing quickly, especially in a short-staffed environment.
Absolutely, and I think that's where getting them engaged with the mobile learning, with the app, to be able to learn some questions, answers the questions that they have when no one's around right now. And that really kind of leads into our next tip, which is 5. Consider coaching and leadership training. And I think that especially now, what happens in the environment. We have single coverage a lot, and this is something that's difficult for our leaders to coach. If they're on the floor from 10 to 12, they got a third, the second shift comes in at noon, they get their lunch. By the time they get through the rush and so forth, there's very little time for coaching. And that's so important to have that human interaction and reinforcement, to have people observe behaviors of another associate and then be able to give them real-time coaching and feedback, because I really do believe that that's how people can shape. I think the other thing we just talked about too is that for people that are not in leadership roles yet, that third key, that almost is aspirational leaders on that too. This is where the coaching and leadership can really pay off for them, to have coaches on the floor that could be the buddies. We've got a lot of retailers do that, the buddy system. So coaching doesn't always have to mean leadership, but leadership training doesn't always have to be a leader yet. It's really be getting them ready for that next role, making them a better team player, a better associate to help everybody on that. And I think that, that's what's critical with always making sure that your leaders, they have high influence, always working on coaching as part of your culture. JD, what else? What else do you think is important about coaching and leadership training?
Two quick points I would make are: 1, half of retail managers are burned out on a daily basis.
Yes.
So you cannot ask them to do more than they're already doing. That conversation has to begin with, how do we simplify the manager workload and take something off of them so they can more effectively focus on their team and taking care of their people and enabling their people, and less on things like administrative tasks, right? Getting them out of the middle of having to be the communication channel for the frontline workforce, right? If they send an email to the manager then tells everybody the information, right? So there's ways that we can simplify the manager workflow to help them focus on the right things within the job instead of trying to focus on everything and simply not being able to take care of their people. So that's 1. And then 2 is, as you said, looking at leadership development, management preparedness as an ongoing conversation, less of a programmatic conversation. I walk into a lot of retail stores. I love going up to the manager and saying, how'd you become the manager here? And oftentimes what I hear is, well, the manager who was here quit. I was the most experienced or most capable sales associate. Now I'm the manager. And the next training program 6 months from now, and I'm figuring it out as I go. And interestingly, that's my story as being a frontline manager. That's what happened to me. I didn't go to the classes until months after I had the keys. So instead of looking at it from that perspective, saying, how do we continuously develop people who are maybe looking for that opportunity, start to expose people to different types of topics and coursework that's going to build their management and leadership capabilities. So when the opportunity arises, whether it's suddenly or through a labor management strategy, people are more ready to take that step versus having to take the step and then wait to get the support. So there's a lot of different ways we can look at enabling managers that better fits the reality of what their experience is like day to day.
Yeah, and today, I mean, it's not just, we can say, from the pandemic, it's just a lot of factors that are really really changing the brick and mortar store and the environment and what's happening. And so it's really key. And the fact is that, we're promoting people, not just that whole warm bodies thing, that we're really getting them ready in advance. I think it's critical. All right, winding down, we've got number 6, and this is really let them teach to learn. We're big proponents of teaching people, because if they are teaching others, then they can also model the skills all the time. It makes them better at what we do. One of our key leadership programs, retail store leadership, one of our top clients that implemented this, the Train the Trainer program, and they're a very large organization. And so we've certified hundreds of trainers to deliver the training to store leaders. And that's starting at that 3rd key, system manager and store manager level. What they said is that they can track promotability by the trainers. So once they put them in the program, this is development for them. They're not only, it's kind of paying it back, pay it forward. They're developing other leaders, but in them, they have really accelerated the behaviors that they know they need to model them all the time. If I'm going to teach it, I need to preach it, I need to model it. So they become better at it. And so the promotability is so strong that they've been able to track that as one of the success factors is to getting people ready to get to the next level by having them certified. So it is really a benefit. And for larger organizations, you can internalize it, they can have the stories. And I think that's really important too. And I know that that's something that that you do believe in Axonify, but I think we're going to go right to 7, because I think celebrating success is probably the biggest key to everything. And that is really sharing those stories that are so important, the successful stories. In the store, it looks like bulletin boards, in the back room, whether it be a district newsletter or an email from the district manager, or there's corporate visits that happen in the stores, and people call people by their name and celebrate the success that they're having. JD, there's a lot of ways that in Axonify on that platform that we celebrate success. And tell me a little bit about that and why you think this is so important, especially the retailer that you are too.
Yeah, when we look at the research we do, because we continuously do research into the frontline employee experience in a variety of industries, including retail, and appreciation comes up constantly as one of the reasons that people stay and one of the reasons people leave is lack of appreciation from the company and their manager. And the thing I like to remind retailers is none of your associates work for your company. They work for their manager and their store. So fostering community and fostering kind of a culture of appreciation and recognition, that's another place we have to enable the manager to be capable of doing that. And for Axonify, it's one of the big reasons. One, we have a rewards engine in our platform so that people, when they make the effort to come in every day and spend a couple of minutes with us and continue to develop their skills, we transform that effort into tangible rewards in a lot of cases where people maybe earn a gift card, they earn company swag. So simple ways to recognize people for the effort of developing themselves. And then the last comment would be that it's a big part of our story when it comes to communication. Because Axonify is an enablement app, we have learning capability, task capability, recognition capability, and communication capability. And a big part of that is providing people with an outlet to share the great things they have going on within their environment. So maybe a manager in this particular store can share something awesome that's taking place with the broader company so the corporate team can see into those celebrations and those successes in a way that you don't do when you just kind of visit the store every once in a while or the DC once in a while. So recognition is also a big part, and appreciation is a big part of our communication story as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm just going to ask, we've got a few minutes before we'll break into Q&A, but is anybody, what do you do to celebrate your organization? You can just go ahead and put that in Q&A. I think that we can kind of gather that. Is it, really sharing those stories is so important, celebrating that success and then sharing that story. I really do believe that builds the culture in the organization. Just like you said, that recognition and appreciation. Who doesn't like to feel good about what they're doing and taking pride in their work, but celebrating the successes, even the micro wins. We have to really think about, we can't say, well, that's their job, right? Just keep encouraging it. I believe that leaders should be encouraging 75, 80% of the time, even if it's behaviors you think they're doing, because when you stop, that's when the behaviors start to slip because nobody thinks it's important anymore. So if you like those behaviors, if that's what's really driving the results, please keep sharing. So I don't know if we have anything else, and it doesn't look like in Q&A for that, but I'm going to ask you not just about your celebrating success, but let's spend the last few minutes now. If there's any questions for JD or me, let's get them in Q&A, the right place. Great. We've got one from Melody. Do you offer in-app survey functionality? And do you have in-app badging?
In-app survey capability, yes. Badging, yes, as well. So there's, depending on exactly what you mean by badging, because there can be a variety of different things there. But specifically around surveys, we have a variety of different ways to basically turn the conversation into a two-way dialogue between the frontline workforce and the corporate team. So that can be, there's a variety of different mechanisms for that. One of them is pulse survey type capabilities where you can get a quick response. And we, I don't have a number top of mind, but we have one customer we worked with recently where we accelerated their kind of survey adoption and response rate by upwards of 60+% of what they were normally getting. Because again, we build this habit of talking to the employee every day. So when we have people's eyes every shift, when we mix in survey questions, announcements, different types of communication, we get a lot of responses very quickly. So instead of doing that once a year survey, you can more look at pulsing feedback from your employees to find out what's going on now versus what was going on 6 months ago, which is unfortunately what happens in a lot of cases with surveys.
Absolutely. Great. Thanks, JD. And that's another thing we do in all of our virtual training is, polling to really reinforce previous learning to make sure we're still in the top game. Again, I've learned that from Axonify. We got to stretch that brain in the beginning of a session. They're already on that app, but now let's get it again to get them in the right mindset for learning. And I think that, so even if without the mobility, without the technology, it's just a matter of reinforcing that. Great. We've got a question from John Bailey. What's one of your best kept secrets for gaining stakeholder buy-in for reinforcement and other practices you discussed today? JD, I don't know if you want to take that first and then I'll weigh in.
Coincidentally, I'm actually doing a session with almost that exact title at the ATD event in a week and a half with our friends from Kroger. But so one of the things, again, kind of going back to what I said earlier, is when we talk about buy-in, it's about understanding the people from which we're trying to gain buy-in and the people we're trying to influence, what they are held accountable for, how they perceive the type of work we do. And I think one of the important things to consider is their experience with learning and development. So if you're an L&D professional in retail trying to influence the IT team, the executive team, product, marketing, whoever that may be, what's their experience with the learning and development function of the organization? Do they have exposure to the types of things we can do to help people do their jobs more effectively? And are we putting our story into their language and the outcomes they're held accountable for, not trying to get them to do things that we need and creating a disconnect in that conversation? So for me, it's really understanding your stakeholders, building the relationship before you got to ask for something. Because the only time you show up at IT is when you're asking for something, right? Where are you going to fall on the priority list? So it's really kind of comes down to understanding your stakeholder, building those relationships and connecting that value.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think that, as a lot of times with the executives, I think that they forget what it's like to learn because they have to do, we do a lot when you're expected to perform. And so a lot of times, when you think about an organization, it's the higher you go up, the less structured training that you're getting. And it's a difficult job. And I think that what we do, one of the things that in elements of our senior leader training is to get them to remember what's a skill, a sport, something they've learned in the last 3 years. What did it take, right? And really thinking about till they got good. And it really does help kind of get the business case for what is it like to learn something new? It doesn't just happen, right? You can't do all that on the job. So I think that they get to understand, yeah, it takes some skills, it takes practice. I got to do feedback. I really wasn't good at first, right? And then how did you perfect your skill and really hone in on those type of things and sharpen your saw, sharpen your skills on that. So I think getting them to understand what it was like and remember even some things that are recent, but making it a little bit more vulnerable that learning is an opportunity, not for perfection. It's just to get, to practice, to keep getting better at what we do. All right, we got one more question, Jacqueline, and I'm just making sure I've got the right ones.
We had an earlier question to ask JD to talk about his book, which I don't know if he's going to talk about it.
Yes, we are going to go there next. We are going to.
Someone wants to know why you wrote it.
Yeah.
Why?
Okay.
There's two answers to that. One's kind of silly and one is real. So the silly answer is there's a credibility thing that comes with books. There just is, right? So at a certain point professionally, if you want to get your insight and your experience and your perspective out there, a book is still a format that you really have to meaningfully explore. Otherwise, the biggest reason is I learned through the practice of sharing. So I feel like I improve my own perspective and how I kind of come at my work by working my way through kind of reflection of what I've done in the past and how it can inform what I do moving forward. So that's really what happens in this book. So side note, we just talked about influencing stakeholders. That's what chapter 13 is. So what I did in this book was really reflect back on my experience as a manager of frontline operations, as an L&D person at Disney, as an L&D person in a contact center, and condensed it down to kind of the framework that I now apply as part of the work I do at Axonify when it comes to making learning not just something that's available in the flow of work, but something that's part of people's jobs. How do we shift our perspective, help the organization shift their perspective around the value that learning can provide, especially in times of great change and disruption, what we very clearly know recently. That's the story that I tell here. And worst case scenario, you also get some zany stories about me at Disney. So if you're curious, feel free to check it out. The book URL is jdwroteabook.com. That is the vibe of this book. I tried to write the most fun and practical book in learning and development. And again, through the lens of what it's like to support frontline workers, because that's what I've done my entire career. So check it out. Let me know what you think. jdwroteabook.com. And otherwise, if you have any questions about that, Axonify, anything we've talked about today, feel free to ping me on LinkedIn. Always happy to chat.
Absolutely. You know, there was one question about Axonify using AI today, and what's your view on that? So I don't know if you want to go through that before we...
Do we have 2 hours? So long story short.
No, we don't.
So we've been applying AI and machine learning in Axonify for 7+ years of our history at this point. So when we talk about things like personalization, adaptive learning, we talked about that concept of using data to figure out when we spend a couple of minutes with a retail associate today, where do we spend that time? There's AI components behind the scenes of how we're personalizing the experience. We also use AI to measure the impact of training programs, so to determine, did the training work? We're using lots of data and lots of machine learning models that we build in-house to do that. And then from a generative AI perspective, we actually use that to generate content. So we talk about reinforcement using questions and scenarios and that type of thing as part of the day-to-day experience of Axonify. A couple of years ago, we built our version of a content assistant, which takes your source material and automatically generates those reinforcement questions for you. So we've been using generative AI pre-ChatGPT, as it were.
Yeah,
so
I was just going to say, in ChatGPT, yeah. Let's not go there right yet. So we want to talk about designing courses and validating that. But
and a lot of things in conversation right now around how the kind of continued evolution of AI can help us improve the experience of frontline workers. So a lot more to come, but we've been leveraging AI in our experience the entire time I've been with Axonify.
Great. Jacqueline, I think we got to all the questions now. Is that?
We're all good.
All right. So buy JD's book. We're really pleased to have you. JD, it's always great hanging out with you. You make things so easy, and you're a wealth of information. We have JD's contact information on LinkedIn and Axonify's and numbers for MOHR Retail as well. I just want to thank you, JD, for hanging out with us today and helping us reinforce the ROI on training investment and to really kind of showcase a little bit of why MOHR Retail partners with Axonify, because it's just really a 1 + 1 = 3. We really do believe the partnership is great. So thanks for being here. Most importantly, thank you to everyone who has participated today. I apologize for the chat, but I am so happy you all found Q&A and that worked and we were able to get through it. I want to thank my co-host Jacqueline for keeping us on track. And we just really appreciate it. Have a great day, a super week. And JD, look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye all.
Bye.